Hello everybody, it's Wyvern here with another bit of Total War Warhammer 2 quick match gameplay. This time around I'm playing as High Elves against the Empire led by you on the map, the Oasis of False Hope. And going with a very wide build here as Empire, or just High Elves. I do think this is one of the matchups that in Warhammer 2 that's definitely a bit skewed, or in Mortal Empires that's a bit skewed, and I think it's skewed in favor of the High Elves actually, and I'll try to explain that as we go through. My opponent does immediately start barraging because he has a lot of artillery, so I'm going to pause for a second. For my lord, I did pick a prince on a Star Dragon. Now, of course, you are very susceptible. Now, of course, this is a very powerful mount. It gives you a lot of HP. It gives you very high melee attack and melee defense despite being a monstrous creature. Usually, monsters debuff your melee attack and defense by a lot. Hits like a truck with armor piercing. Has, of course, very powerful breath attack. Stand your ground, as well as I crammed in Blade of Cabal Corhadris on my lord here, which boosts his melee attack and armor piercing damage, which is of course already very, very powerful. Very, very high. Now, of course, you do have to be careful with your dragons because Empire can bring a lot of handguns if they really want to, or and Net of Mintok, for example, which could absolutely devastate a dragon. 6,000 HP or no. If you get focused fire by an Empire gun line, you are going down like a 9-pin. So that's definitely something you want to be cautious about, and definitely something I was a little worried about going in. I did not bring any heroes for my Empire army, and instead I decided to go with a very wide force. Empire has a lot of squishy infantry. Their only non-squishy infantry really is great swords. And I figured great swords are not that, and great swords don't have shields, so they're still going to be very susceptible to archers. And the rest of what Empire can bring that has decent armor is all large. So Demigryphs, Reichsguard, Empire Knights, Knights of the Blazing Sun. All those and steam tanks, all those units are large, and so my anti-large infantry should perform very well against them, as should my lord, his dragon. So for my front line, it is a circle. I guess it's a bit of a noob box here with 6 units of spearmen. These guys are slightly veteraned up. Some of them are, at any rate. Actually, maybe all of them are. My hope is that they will trade effectively with any lower-end Empire infantry, because of course they do hit not very hard, but they have very high melee defense, especially as long as their martial prowess is up, and they have slightly better armor than Empire infantry, silver shields, which will make them tanky against Empire shooting, all that sort of stuff. In my front, the core of my army here is 2 units of Phoenix Guard, and of course these guys are just very powerful overall. They cause fear, they have physical resistance, huge armor. We're going to throw things in slow-mo here. And armor piercing, anti-large, they're just very powerful overall. Martial mastery. And my hope is that they can, in the worst case, trade with great swords. Maybe not efficiently, but they can trade. And combined with some terror routes and hopefully collapsing the rest of my opponent's line, they'll function well enough. And behind that, a single unit of white lines of Krays just ready to flex forward, really to support the Phoenix Guard and crushing a hole, hopefully, through my opponent's center. These guys, of course, hit fairly hard. They're comparable to Chaos Warriors with great weapons, really. I think that's the most direct comparison. Though, of course, with a built-in resistance and not quite as good stats in built-in missile resistance, and not quite as good stats on armor or that sort of stuff. Now my opponent is immediately casting Kindle Flame, or is casting something fire-based. I'm not entirely sure what. Oh, a Fireball, there we go. And that is actually causing Kindle Flame to go into effect. And now my last bit of infantry here is this 6-man squad of vanilla archers. Now these guys will be very susceptible to the Hellstorms that my opponent brought, but they're very cheap, and they are surprisingly survivable just because of martial prowess in close quarters, and they'll be able to shoot down my opponent's infantry hopefully very effectively, just because Empire infantry and missile units and all that sort of stuff is dirt cheap, or sorry, is really bad on the armor, and does not tend to have shields, or good shields if they do have shields. It's only bronze. That rocket here does hit the Phoenix Guard pretty directly, and that actually results in 4 dead ones here. The rockets do not actually cause fire damage, so despite looking that way. But for my opponent, his army is composed of Empire General, who's actually on foot with only Foe Seeker and Stand Your Ground and Hold the Line, I suppose, alongside a Sorcerer of Fire who actually brought all of his magic spells. Once again, this is a bit interesting. I've been seeing this a lot, and I don't know if it's because a lot of people are new or because people are just unsure what magic they should use, but I've been seeing a lot of people bring wizards with all their full roster of magic, and I'm not entirely sure why that is. Generally, you don't want to be doing that, in my opinion. For his front line, my opponent has a mix of spearmen and with shields and halberdiers. The halberdiers, of course, provide armor-piercing anti-large, and high elves do have a decent amount of large units and nasty large units at that. So the halberds are not a bad choice there. Out on the flank, 2 units of Free Company militia and a unit of handguns definitely provides a decent, fairly cheap firing line, backed by Tattersouls, who should tear through the Wood Elves or the High Elf spears pretty effectively, given their performance really against Wood Elf infantry, from what I know. In the back, 2 units of Hellstorm rocket batteries just tear through my squishy infantry and force me to attack, and then 2 units of Reichsguard. And Reichsguard, of course, with their very high armor, will actually perform pretty well even against high elf spearmen. Unfortunately, this unit of our Reichsguard over here does get caught by my fire breath attack from the Prince and absolutely roasted, losing 17 models, or actually 18 models, and basically wavering almost instantly. In the meantime, my archers start focusing fire on the halberdiers at max range, and you can see the halberds, who have very bad armor and no shields, are being torn through very quickly. I'm trying to focus on the halberds because they're the biggest threat to my Phoenix Guard and White Lines of Krace. The spearmen are basically irrelevant, and I can, while it might be atrocious, I will be able to plow through them eventually with Phoenix Guard. And you can see the halberdiers are always routing, and I'll be able to shortly change target. Unfortunately, my opponent is definitely not doing a terrible job here, and he's actually getting his Reichsguard around the flank. And if he gets it into the back here, into my archers, they will tear through him very, very effectively. Reichsguard, as I mentioned before, have very high armor stats, and actually passable melee defense and melee, plus, of course, decent charge bonus. So they get into these archers, you can see they're immediately just plowing through them, doing huge amounts of work. But my lord is there, my prince, and he dives down, popping stand your ground to help the archers stand their ground. Their ground. Over here, in the meantime, in the front line, my opponent has actually popped the Flaming Sword of Ruin, but these halberds are already getting torn through. You can see I'm actually firing into the fray here, trying to shut down the Tattersouls, who are trying to beat down the Phoenix Guard, who has lost martial mastery because, of course, they have been they took the loss of their HP. Over here, in the meantime, spears are pursuing the handguns and Free Company militia, who are probably on skirmish stands, which is why they're all routing off in the bad direction. In the meantime, these spears over here are getting a flank. The archers over in the meantime are being screened somewhat effectively by the spearmen, though this unit over here is routing off. And the Reichsguard is definitely having a bit of a rough time, though. The Reichsguard, of course, with their very high armor, are basically able to ignore the spear's damage, at least to an extent. Hellstorm, in the meantime, is being shut down by arrow fire, finally, and this other Hellstorm is being shut down by the spears, who have finally gotten on top of it. And I've decided to pull these spears offline, away from chasing the Free Company militia, and back into the fray here, trying to pincer these guys. Phoenix Guard, of course, with their huge armor, can basically ignore Tattersouls to an extent. It's going to be a very rough fight for both sides, but or for them as far as killing the Tattersouls, who of course have decent melee defense, especially when Strength of the Penitent is up. But it'll be very interesting. Over here, in the meantime, Phoenix Guard has forced a breach. Spearmen are broken. These halberds are very low, and I'm able to collapse now upon these spearmen with shields over here, even as my archers are getting once again charged by the Reichsguard. The spears are simply not fast enough to intercept the Reichsguard consistently. I might have been better off bringing, say, 2 units or a unit of Valyrian Reavers or a unit of Silver Helms rather than the spears, but I did not, so that's too bad. These Reichsguard, though, in the meantime, are getting caught by the spears on the charge. The spears, despite their armor, should be able to beat them down eventually. In the meantime, there's enough archer units here that are still intact and able to fire to bring down this Free Company militia down to size. And I do cast a breath attack on this other unit of Free Company. I'm actually more worried about the Free Company, and it actually takes out a third of their models. I'm actually more worried about the Free Company militia than I'm about the handguns, because at this point my lord is still very healthy, and the handguns don't really have that much DPS against the archers, I don't think. But you can see the Free Company militia here definitely getting focused down. And those poor guys over there are just routing off. And now I'm actually able to shift fire onto the handguns. You know, as my prince does dive on the Reichsguard, who are susceptible to terror and are just going to rout off. Now the Tattersouls are still kicking around and kicking on 10 models. And the Bright Wizard isn't here. You can see my opponent's infantry is trying to push in, but you can see the Phoenix Guard are tearing through even the general. Their melee attack is actually higher than his melee defense, which is definitely pretty impressive. And now the game is basically over. We're going to throw things in the fast forward because there's some Tattersouls to beat down, which actually takes an annoyingly long amount of time. You can see my archer just firing away. But that is game. So I think the match of Empire against High Elves is definitely a bit skewed. I think if you want to get a decent army against High Elves with Empire, you are basically forced to run a mix of greatswords and heavy cav, either Reichsguard or Demigryphs, maybe backed by some artillery, very much maybe. The simple fact is that High Elves have a very powerful anti-large, they can bring a lot of it. Their most basic infantry is an anti-large unit, though without armor piercing, will make cavalry not that effective. Their shooting units are stupidly powerful. They have huge range. They outrange your crossbows by 15 meters and outrange your handguns by even more, by 35. And they'll absolutely tear through your squishy backline while being very cheap, so your opponent can field a lot of them. Phoenix Guard, of course, is a massive problem, who can tear through basically any unit Empire can bring to the field. And of course, the High Elves do have Flying Lords, which could be a problem as well. So I think that if I was going to suggest ideal, and I think that this means that a lot of Empire's usual strengths are definitely not quite working out here. I think that what Empire has to do is either go for is generally going to be a very rush-heavy strat, and perhaps bringing a handful of handguns, or something similar actually to what my opponent did here, but maybe dropping the spears with shields in favor of, say, flagellants, or maybe bringing a few more. Bring some swordsmen, or bring some great swords, that sort of thing, just to try to win out the front line, and then crushing the back line. Something like Hellstorm rocket batteries, they can definitely rake up a lot of kills, or an okay amount of kills. I don't think they're really worth it. They're just too expensive for what they do. Hellstorm rocket batteries are almost 2,000 down the drain. That could have been really, that you got to think about it. That could have been basically 3 units of handguns and 5 units of swordsmen, for example. And with that, you can hopefully swarm the High Elves. But the problem is the High Elves, once again, they can go very cheap, they can go very wide, and definitely cause you a bit of problem. In this game, you can see the archers did a lot of the heavy lifting, though, as did the Phoenix Guard and the White Lions of Trace. My spearmen did not perform particularly well, and that was kind of to be expected. They're not really there to carry anything. They're just there to kind of dive in and tie the enemy down. So yeah, I definitely think this is one of the more, and you can see my Lord, of course, racked up a huge amount of kills. I definitely think this is one of the more skewed matchups, and I definitely have been kind of trying to theory craft some way for. And I did not play this game perfectly at all. As my opponent very easily got into my backline multiple times with the Reichsguard, and I was still able to kind of bounce back from that very easily. So I definitely think there's the Empire's a bit limited in its options and how to shut down the High Elves. I think one of the other options might be to bring in the new Hellblaster, because that's been buffed, and try to shut down enemy high priority targets with that, and then simply try to swarm your opponent in close quarters with infantry. And definitely use magic to support yourself as well. Regardless, good game to my opponent. I do hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to leave a like and subscribe down below. If you have any comments, criticism, any questions about Total War Warhammer 2 or anything like that, be sure to post those down in the comments, and I will respond as soon as I can. As usual, guys, I do appreciate you all for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye for now.